This weapon weighs 109 pounds. That is heavier than most adult humans. It fires 20mm cannon rounds that produce 35,000 foot-pounds of energy. And in 2021, it nearly killed one of YouTube's biggest gun channels. This is the Lahti L-39, Finland's absolutely insane anti-tank cannon disguised as a rifle. And here is the controversial part. This is the only anti-tank rifle from World War II that actually worked throughout the entire war. Let's talk about it. All right, so it is November 1939. The Soviet Union just invaded Finland with absolutely massive force. We are talking about 540,000 Soviet troops with thousands of tanks rolling across the border. Finland's response, 180,000 soldiers and basically 0 tanks of their own. Most countries would just surrender at this point. I mean, the math is not looking good. But Finland said, you know what? We cannot make enough tanks. We cannot make enough artillery. But we can make the biggest, heaviest, most absolutely ridiculous anti-tank rifle the world has ever seen. Enter the Lahti L-39. Named after its designer, Aimo Lahti, this thing is not a rifle. Let me be clear about that. It is a 20mm autocannon that happens to be shoulder-fired, and it weighs 109 pounds. To put that in perspective, the average adult human weighs around 170 pounds. You are basically carrying 60% of a person, except this person is made of steel and wants to kill Soviet tanks. Now, let us talk about what makes this weapon so completely insane. The Lahti L-39 is 7 feet long. 7 feet. Most people are not even 6 feet tall. This rifle is taller than you. It is chambered in 20mm by 138B. That is not a rifle round. That is an anti-aircraft cannon round that Finland decided to shoulder fire. The bullet weighs over 2,300 grains. For comparison, a standard rifle bullet is around 150 grains. This is more than 15 times heavier. The round travels at around 2,500 feet per second and generates 35,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The boys' rifle that British soldiers hated, that produced 13,000 foot-pounds, the Lahti produces almost 3 times that amount. It is not in the same category. It is not even in the same sport. Now here is where it gets even more ridiculous. This weapon is semi-automatic. It holds a 10-round magazine that loads from the top and ejects spent cases from the bottom. And that bottom ejection is violent. The empty brass comes flying out with enough force to break fingers if your hand is in the wrong place. To cock this beast, you cannot just pull a bolt. You have to use a gear system. You push in a lever and crank it around twice to chamber around. The Solothurn S-18-1000, Switzerland's 20mm rifle, uses a chain system. The Lahti uses gears. Because Finland looked at complicated and said, not complicated enough. Fun fact. The Lahti originally was not even designed as an anti-tank rifle. Aimo Lahti designed it as an anti-aircraft weapon in 1937. But when the Soviets invaded, Finland said, we need to kill tanks more than planes right now, so they just pointed it at tanks instead, and it worked. The weapon sits on these massive sleds. Finnish soldiers would literally drag these 109-pound monsters through the snow using those sleds. Once you reached your firing position, you would flip down a bipod and set up. The whole system requires a 2-man crew, 1 to fire, 1 to help move it and feed ammunition. Oh, and just like the boys' rifle, the iron sights are offset to the left side. So when you are aiming center mass, you are actually shooting to the right. Good luck with accuracy. The muzzle brake is absolutely enormous. It has to be. You are trying to tame 35,000 foot-pounds of energy. Even with that massive brake, the recoil is still substantial. But here is the interesting part. When Kentucky Ballistics tested one, he said shooting it off the sleds was pretty rough. But once he deployed the bipod, quote, I barely even felt that, end quote. So the Finns figured out how to make a 109-pound cannon comfortable to shoot, which is honestly more impressive than making it in the first place. Okay, can we talk about Finnish engineering for a second? Because this is wild. Finland in 1939 had a population of 3.5 million people. For comparison, New York City today has over 8 million. Finland was basically one medium-sized city, and they are facing the Soviet Union, 170 million people, thousands of tanks, overwhelming force. Most countries would look at that situation and negotiate surrender. Finland looked at it and said, let's make a 109-pound shoulder cannon and drag it through minus 40-degree weather to ambush Soviet tanks. And then they actually did it, and it worked. The entire Winter War is just Finland absolutely refusing to accept reality. I mean, they lost territory in the end, but the fact that they survived it all is insane. The Soviets expected to win in 2 weeks. It took them 3.5 months and cost them hundreds of thousands of casualties. Finnish stubbornness, everyone. It is a beautiful thing. But anyway, back to the Lahti. So you might be thinking, okay, this weapon is insane. 109 pounds, requires 2 people, complicated gear system. Did it actually work in combat? Yes, it worked incredibly well. The Lahti L-39 could penetrate 40 millimeters of armor at 300 meters. That was enough to destroy early Soviet T-26 and BT series tanks. Finnish soldiers would set up in the forests, camouflaged in the snow, and wait. A Soviet tank column would roll by. Bang, 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 bang. 10 rounds of 20 millimeter armor piercing in about 15 seconds. The first tank is disabled. The column stops. Chaos. And the Finnish crew would pack up their 109-pound cannon and disappear into the forest before Soviet infantry could respond, then set up again at the next ambush point. The Finns produced around 1,900 Lahtis during the war, and unlike every other anti-tank rifle, the Lahti remained effective throughout the entire conflict. Even when Soviet armor got thicker, the Lahti was still useful for destroying equipment, fortifications, and light vehicles. Now, here's a story you need to know. In 2021, Kentucky Ballistics, one of YouTube's biggest gun channels, was shooting a .50 caliber rifle. He loaded a slap round, specialized armor-piercing ammunition. He pulled the trigger. The gun exploded. The threads from the rifle cap sliced into his neck, right next to his carotid artery, blood everywhere. He is bleeding out in his yard. He plugged the wound with his thumb, stumbled to his truck, and drove himself to the hospital while his dad called ahead. The doctor said if he had arrived 5 minutes later, he would have died. He survived, made a full recovery, came back even stronger. And even after that experience, when he shoots the Lahti, you can see him treating it with absolute respect. He calls it nothing to shake a stick at, because this is not a rifle. This is a crew-served autocannon. When someone who survived a catastrophic gun explosion says this thing is serious business, you listen. Fun fact, Finland kept some Lahtis in their military inventory until the 1980s. That is 45 years after World War II ended. Meanwhile, Britain retired the boys' rifle in 1943 because it was useless. Germany abandoned the Panzerbüchse 39 in 1941. The Lahti, still going strong decades later. At the end of the day, the Lahti L-39 is the ultimate example of Finnish problem solving. Take a problem, over-engineer the solution, make it unreasonably heavy, use it anyway. Watch it work. Here is my hot take, and I know this will trigger debates. The Lahti L-39 is objectively the best anti-tank rifle of World War II. Not the most practical, not the lightest, not the easiest to use, but the best at its job. The boys' rifle? Obsolete by 1942. Soldiers hated it. The German Panzerbüchse 39, abandoned by 1941, could not penetrate Soviet armor. The Soviet PTRD and PTRS, marginally effective but still struggled against later German tanks. The Lahti, effective from 1939 all the way through 1945, used in the Winter War, used in the Continuation War, used for decades after the war ended. Was it heavy? Yes. 109 pounds is absurd. Did it require 2 people? Absolutely. Was it complicated? The gear cocking system was over-engineered. But when Finnish soldiers needed to kill Soviet tanks in the middle of a frozen forest at minus 40 degrees, the Lahti did its job. Every single time. And in war, that is literally all that matters. Not comfort, not convenience, just does it work when you need it? The Lahti worked, everyone else's rifles did not. All right, final question for the debates. If you were a Finnish soldier in the Winter War and you had to choose your anti-tank weapon, which would you pick? Option A, the Lahti L-39, 109 pounds. Requires a buddy to help you move it. Complicated gear system, but actually kills Soviet tanks throughout the entire war. Option B, the boys' rifle that Britain would sell you. 36 pounds, much lighter, but becomes completely obsolete by 1942 and also destroys your shoulder. Option C, just throw rocks at the tank and hope for the best. I know my answer, and it is not option C. Though, honestly, option C might be more effective than the boys. Let me know your choice in the comments, and if you want to see more about the weapons that actually worked versus the ones that failed spectacularly, let me know what to cover next. Thanks for watching!